Lost and found. Click. Empty. Click. Empty. Another. Click. Found. Dead. Sergei Sergeyevich Prokhorov leaned back in his chair. The old wood creaked, a feeble, limp creaking, unable to drown out the shrill howl of the cooling fans in the system unit. My head was pounding mercilessly, as if someone had installed those howling fans there too, and they were spinning and spinning, spinning and spinning. The acid blue coloring of VK was burned into my retinas. My jaw ached from constantly clenching my teeth. How come they hadn't crumbled to dust from the constant friction? Sergei Sergeyevich closed his eyes, feeling the negative image from the screen flicker under his eyelids. At 53, he still boasted the remnants of his former beauty. But lately, his attractiveness had begun to fade like gold leaf from cheap jewelry. Bags under his red eyes were growing. His skin was sagging like candle wax, forming a sagging chin and lumps on his jaw. His hair was graying and thinning. He wasn't a wreck yet, but the rate of decay suggested that by 60, Sergei Sergeyevich might be falling apart completely. He paid no more attention to his appearance than to the rest of the world around him, unless, of course, you count his VK news feed. But the sight of his double in the mirror filled him with a kind of inexplicable disgust. He wanted nothing to do with this hunched man, with his day's worth of stubble and his empty eyes, staring at something invisible and his own. Opening his eyes, Sergei Sergeyevich returned to the screen. Instead of his own photo, his profile picture was a mutilated teddy bear with its guts spilling out. Some unknown people from search engines would occasionally message him with something like, "Cool profile picture, bro." This youthful newspeak offended him, but he silently sent a neutral yellow face with a smile, knowing it would completely kill any potential correspondence. He had no interest in dealing with idiots who didn't know how to properly place commas in sentences. He was only interested in lost people. The wall was covered with identical ads in red frames reposted from city search sites. "Help find a teenager," screamed the capital letters, propping up photographs of girls 12, 15, 18 years old, from wide-eyed children to nearly mature women. On the right were the last name, first name and patronymic, age, date of disappearance, and the lost girl's appearance and clothing. Not a word about how much her parents loved her or what a wonderful child they had. In the photographs, the girls were mostly smiling. These were the open, childish smiles of those who hadn't yet learned some of the unpleasant nuances of this world. For example, this: "If you are lost, there's no guarantee your all-powerful parents will find you." Or this: "If you're found, there's no guarantee you won't get lost again." Sergei Sergeyevich couldn't see the search results on his wall. He had to click on a photo and go to the search groups page, where the caption "Found alive" or "Found dead" would appear over the ad. He would immediately delete the "Found alive" from his page. Naturally, most of them were like that. Puberty is the perfect time to run, hide, and return, testing out your parents' love and the theory. When I disappear, they'll all immediately regret that. They loved, they regretted, but they might never get the chance to say it in person. Found, died. He left, creating his own little virtual cemetery of stupid or simply unlucky girls. Those who could be categorized as not yet found remained on the wall amidst the graves. Most likely, these undiscovered girls were also dead, but Sergei Sergeyevich preferred to consider them alive until proven otherwise, deftly skipping through the long list of hidden dead, whom he now easily recognized by appearance and name. He clicked on the lost ones, checking whether they had changed their status to found dead or found alive. It was a lottery of sorts. You scratch off the protective layer, hoping for a win, only to find another 2 apples and a lemon. Sergei Sergeyevich knew in his head that the longer the lost ones hung on the wall, the less likely it was that the child would be found in any form. But the passage of time had a surprising effect on his excitement. It seemed to him that every girl was destined to be found. She was simply allotted a certain amount of time, and therefore, with each passing day, his chances grew. He just had to be patient and wait. Wait. The doorbell rang like a sharp claw, scratching my eardrums. Sergei Sergeyevich stood up. His head immediately went blank, and he swayed, clutching the tabletop. Glancing at his watch, he noticed with surprise that he'd been wandering the paths of his cemetery for over an hour. The bell rang again. Sergei Sergeyevich went to open the door. Behind the door stood the neighbor Nastya with a saucepan in her hands. "Hi, Seryosh. I thought you were going to come," she said, smiling. Sergei Sergeyevich chuckled sheepishly. For some reason, he always felt shy when he saw Nastya. There was something bossy about her. Not the womanly bossy kind, where you only agreed because you didn't want to be scolded, but a serious, quiet kind brimming with wisdom and confidence. Given her small stature and plump figure, it should have seemed unnatural, but no, it didn't. A few days ago, she turned 45. On her birthday, a small group gathered in the apartment next door. They drank, sang, and danced. Sergei Sergeyevich declined the invitation of his newly minted darling. He wasn't particularly fond of people, but the following evening, Nastya came to him, bringing 2 bottles of Georgian wine and some food. They sat in the kitchen. She talked. He listened. Then, after an awkward pause, in which Nastya's desire to say something was clearly palpable, she left. Sergei Sergeyevich returned to the kitchen table, took some cognac from the refrigerator, and began to ponder why he couldn't accept her unspoken offer, why Nastya had never stayed with him. But the answer was obvious. The cemetery. "Are you stuck on your computer again? Why the computer right away, Nastya? What do you think I am? Some kind of schoolboy or something?" "Worse," she laughed. "Old fool. How old am I? I've only reached the age of 50. Okay, let you be a half-century fool." Sergei Sergeyevich took a step to the side. "Come in, Nastya. I'll be right there," she said, smiling, and walked in. "I brought you some soup," Why? Nastya looked at him sternly. Don't argue. You'll give yourself an ulcer with your diet. You're sitting here like an owl, alone, staring at the screen. Let's go have lunch. They sat and slurped their soup in silence. He worked his spoon vigorously. Nastya was right. He mostly ate junk food, not bothering to cook. Store-bought dumplings and scrambled eggs were the extent of his culinary experimentation. For a second, he even imagined what it would be like if he and Nastya, two lonely people, moved in together and lived like husband and wife. She would wait for him at home every evening, and he would want to return to that house every evening. No, it was all nonsense. His wife was dead, and there couldn't be another. He even felt ashamed of his dreams. He'd gone soft, the damned wimp, wanting a quiet, happy old age. He didn't deserve it. He didn't deserve a damn thing. Seryoja, eh? What kind of angry face are you sitting there with? Sorry, I was lost in thought. Nastya sighed. Sometimes I want to know what you're always thinking about, but I can't get a word out of you. Outside, the full moon, ashamed of its nakedness, hid behind the clouds. In the corner of the room, a small wall lamp gently caressed the darkness with its warm hand. In the opposite corner, the glow of the monitor cut through the darkness like a sharp, cold blade. Sergei Sergeyevич's face seemed empty in the screen's glow, as if the soulless light itself were sucking the life out of him. Sergei Sergeyevich forced himself to remove his hand from the mouse. For the past half hour, he'd been opening the boxes of lost and found items over and over again, trying to figure out if they had turned into coffins. He opened and closed them a second time, a third time, until his vision began to blur from the red frames. It was time to go to bed. He got up and, without washing or undressing, collapsed onto his bed. Before he drifted off, he thought Nastya wouldn't like this. He moved through the cemetery, squeezing along narrow paths, squeezed in on both sides by different colored fences, and studied the tombstones. Sokolova Elena Viktorovna on the left, Novgorodtseva Tatiana Andreevna on the right. There were no dates of birth or death. Beneath the image and name carved into the granite were identical inscriptions. Help find a teenager. Beyond the fences, coffins lay on stools. Instead of dug graves, there was thick grass. He opened one of the gates and approached a coffin. He reached out, then pulled it back. He was afraid to see an empty coffin. A skeleton or a rotting, stinking corpse might be in it, but not this emptiness. He couldn't bear the sight of the hated, empty box that should hold the lost one he'd found, but which never appeared. He suddenly reached out and slammed the lid. It flew off with unnaturally plastic ease. He screamed and squeezed his eyes shut, hoping to wake up. He opened it. Sleep hadn't left him. Inside, on the bare, uncovered, untreated boards, lay a folded sheet of squared paper. With a trembling hand, he unfolded it. Found dead was written on it in a sloppy schoolboy's handwriting. He exhaled. Good. He walked out and moved to the next grave. He knocked off the lid and pulled out the leaf. Same thing. His spirits lifted a little. Fortune was on his side, and perhaps he would be able to find the right grave. Moving from one coffin to the next, he moved deeper into the cemetery. Dozens of familiar faces, poor lost ones, who had finally been found. He smiled and nodded with satisfaction. He too had contributed to this, reposting ads that someone had seen and perhaps contributed to the success of the search. The smile faded slightly. No, he didn't have a single friend on his account. He remembered that for sure. He didn't need friends. Friends are lost, like those unfortunate children. So it was better not to have them, just like a family, just like children. A person who has nothing will never experience loss. The smile completely left his face as he approached the next grave. Prokhorov Sergei Sergeyevich, and below, help find this person. With numb fingers, he touched the shiny satin upholstery, feeling the rough boards beneath it, as if he was almost getting to the bitter truth, skillfully covered by a beautiful lie. He gently pushed the lid. It didn't budge. The plastic imitation of the previous coffins had been replaced by a genuine wooden lid. He pushed harder, and even harder. The coffin lay motionless on the stools, a heavy stone. He braced himself against the lid and pushed with all his might. With a cracking sound like breaking bones, it slid open, then fell to the ground with a wet, squelching sound. He looked down, expecting to see a white notebook page, but inside was empty, only tightly fitted, rough-hewn boards. No one had ever found Sergei Sergeyevich Prokhorov's lost one. He rushed to the next grave, but there was his name again, and an empty coffin. And in the next, and in the next. 3 days later, Nastya stayed. For a while, Sergei Sergeyevich, drunken head, swirled with thoughts of betrayal, self-flagellation, and the impossibility of living a normal life. But under the onslaught of Nastya's wine-scented, desperate kisses, these stubborn thoughts sank to the bottom. Lying in bed, feeling the pleasant weight of a woman's body on his right arm, Sergei Sergeyevich savored the emptiness in his head. He didn't need happy thoughts. They were nonsense, invented for those whose rose-colored glasses haven't yet been torn off by the real world. True happiness was the absence of the enraged swarm of nasty little thoughts. What if? Maybe all is not lost yet? After all, there's still a chance. He fell asleep happy that the lost ones had left him alone for at least a little while. They were found. She was found. She was found. At 3:30 in the morning, Sergei Sergeyevich opened his eyes carefully so as not to wake Nastya. He pulled his hand from under her head. She muttered something in her sleep and rolled over. He rushed to the computer. He pushed the mouse. The screen, after endless seconds, lit up. Opening his VK page, Sergei Sergeyevich began frantically spinning the wheel, going lower and lower down his list of lost ones. He rewinded days, weeks, months, trembling with the shame that consumed him. Lower and lower past the virtual graves of those found and the empty coffins of those yet to be discovered. The end of the list appeared suddenly, as if Sergei Sergeyevich had fallen to the bottom of a dry well. The very first ad on this list, the one that started this obsession. Prokhorova Svetlana Sergeyevna. Help find a teenager. On the 10th of November 2015, she left home. Distinguishing features: thin build, height 165 centimeters, short light brown hair, gray-blue eyes. She was wearing a burgundy scarf, a black jacket, dark blue leggings, and dark blue Ugg boots. His daughter looked back at him from the photograph. Her thin-lipped smile on her thin face looked a little sad. She wasn't used to smiling openly at that point. Her eyes were distant. There was a small scar on her chin. Below was a note that made him shudder every time. Distinguishing features: scar on chin, 5 months pregnant. He clicked on the ad. It took him to the search groups page. Nothing. She was never found. Sergei Sergeyevich lowered his head onto the table and let out a barely audible sob. He felt like a traitor. He shouldn't have kept Nastya. He shouldn't have started a new family. He shouldn't have betrayed his daughter. Raising his head, he turned toward the window. For a second, he thought he was being watched, but no. It was just a teddy bear, partially obscured by a greasy tulle curtain. The dust that had settled on it made it look gray. Dirty cotton wool protruded from its ripped belly. He gave this teddy bear to little Svetula Svistula when she was about 10 years old. 2 days earlier, his daughter had hit the handlebars while riding her bike. The impact knocked out 4 of her lower molars. The pain passed faster than the terror of knowing nothing would ever grow in their place. Sergei Sergeyevich tried his best to entertain the little girl, but it was the teddy bear that did the trick. His heartless, bitchy wife grumbled and cursed, saying she was fed up with all these piles of stuffed animals, that they only brought dust and mites. But Sergei Sergeyevich didn't care. His wife always screamed, and his daughter's joy was too strong to be deprived of this moment. Then things started to go south. His wife started drinking more. Sergei Sergeyevich tried to reason, scold, and threaten, but he only gave her an excuse to drown her frayed nerves. Svetulia turned from a sweet child into a nervous teenager, and everything got even worse. Sergei Sergeyevich felt like the steering wheel was slipping out of his hands, and his life was becoming completely unmanageable. This was draining him of strength. When Svetula turned 14, the car flew off a cliff. Sveta returned home pale and silent. She locked herself in her room and emerged only half an hour later. Sergei Sergeyevich sat in front of the television, finishing the 11 o'clock news. His wife was somewhere in the depths of the kitchen, and he didn't even want to know what she was doing there. "Da AP," she drawled. "Yes, whistle. What happened?" It seemed to him that for a moment she was 10 years old again. He even felt a kind of foolish joy. Here was his little girl coming to her dad with her childhood problems. But she was no longer a girl, and her problems were not childish. "Dad, I..." She started sniffling and sobbing. All right, he said gently. "Tell me what happened. We'll sort it all out. I promise. I'm pregnant," she whispered barely audibly. But it seemed to Sergei Sergeyevich that the sound was unbearably loud. His ears even became blocked, and his head began to hurt. You, what? Apparently, the sound in his voice was completely different from what his daughter expected. She jumped up and ran to her room in tears. "What are you making noise about?" His wife emerged from the kitchen. "Don't interfere," Sergei Sergeyevich said through gritted teeth, and she chose to follow his advice. From that moment on, life in the house became unbearable. The mother yelled at her daughter and at him. The daughter yelled at her mother and at him. And he yelled at both of them. He wanted to have a man-to-man talk with her boyfriend, this 18-year-old runt who'd learned to shove his dick into underage girls, but hadn't learned to take responsibility for his actions. Sergei Sergeyevich was afraid of what he might do to him, so he forced himself to postpone the meeting, waiting for his rage to subside a little. But every day he saw his daughter's rounded belly, and the anger washed over him anew. And then they disappeared. Sveta and that idiot, whose name Sergei Sergeyevich didn't even know. He posted ads everywhere he could. He called hospitals and morgues. He combed the woods with volunteers. It was no use. His whistle was nowhere to be found. The daughter left all her things behind. It was as if they decided to run away while strolling through the city park, and just ran straight out of it. Silly, childish, as if they'd intended to come back. But for some reason, they never did. Sergei Sergeyevich continued to wait, trying not to lose hope. But the longer the list of lost ones on his page grew, the more desperate and bitter his hope became. His wife decided not to wait. A year and a half later, she took a shortcut, hurried to the end of her life's journey, and died, choking on her own vomit. Sergei Sergeyevich was not saddened. He buried her and continued to wait for his daughter. He walked over to the windowsill and picked up the teddy bear. It had black button eyes, a blue nose, and patches on its feet that looked like stylized patches. Teddy, he remembered. Their name was Teddy. Then all the girls fell in love with them. They cost several times more than regular bears, but aggressive advertising convinced every girl in town that the path to eternal happiness began with acquiring a teddy bear. He couldn't remember the last time he touched it. For some reason, he was afraid of this toy. It brought back bad memories, a reminder of loss. But he was also afraid to throw it away. After all, his whistle might come back. Yes, she'd run off with her half-wit, but at some point she'd truly want to come back and forgive her wayward father. And he, Sergei Sergeyevich, would be waiting for her. He'd even be ready to accept her fiancé. And he frowned, unless they're dead. A stupid idea, and wrong. If two teenagers disappeared, it means they simply ran away, because they felt misunderstood, offended. Sergei Sergeyevich nodded, calming down. Holding Teddy in his left hand, he ran the fingers of his right hand over the cotton wool sticking out of the toy's belly. He remembered how, during one of their many arguments, his daughter had stabbed the bear with a kitchen knife. "You're such idiots," Sveta screamed, covering her stomach with her hand as if protecting the fetus. He considered stitching up the bear's wound so it would be healthy when his daughter returned. Then he realized that with his skills he would only ruin the toy, so he decided to simply stuff the cotton wool inside. He began carefully packing the white cloud with his index and middle fingers. Suddenly, his fingertips hit something hard. Sergei Sergeyevich frowned. He didn't remember the bear having any mechanisms. It couldn't speak. Carefully, God forbid he tear his daughter's toy apart even further. He slipped his hand inside. He felt an object the size of a lighter, with numerous curves and indentations. Entangled in the cotton wool, it resisted release. Sergei Sergeyevich patiently began to free his find. To the touch, what hid the teddy bear's belly felt very familiar. His fingers remembered it, but his brain refused to place it. Finally, he felt the object clear. His hands were shaking. Had his daughter put something inside? Perhaps it was some kind of case with a note inside explaining why she was running away from home. Or perhaps a note accusing her parents of heartlessness and selfishness? He slowly pulled the object out and froze, staring at it in bewilderment. Little by little, the realization of what he was holding in his right hand began to seep into his brain. He took a shuddering breath. His hand went limp, and the find fell to the floor with a dull thud. Sergei Sergeyevich tried to sit down, but his legs buckled, and he fell to his knees. His kneecaps cracked, sending pain shooting up and down his legs. He leaned on his left hand, unaware that he was crushing the teddy bear clutched in his fist. He reached out with his right and grabbed the grisly find again. Turning his hand palm side up, he unclenched his fingers. A fragment of a lower jaw lay in the palm of his hand. A neat, yellowish chin, 2 canines, and 4 incisors lay exposed. The bone along the edges of the jaw was roughly chipped, as if it had been severed with a blunt object, an axe or a hammer. One of the lateral incisors was broken off a flash of metal inside the tooth. Sergei Sergeyevich tried to stand up, but he had no strength. He sat down on his butt and pressed himself against the wall. Before him stood his whistle, as she had been a year before everything had gone to hell. Slender, like a young tree, she had just burst into fruition and suddenly lost all her babyish plumpness and curves. A more angular and feminine quality had emerged, which looked rather odd alongside the still childish expression on her face. She smiled and pursed her lower lip with her fingers, where new dentures had replaced missing teeth. "I can't get used to it," she said awkwardly, moving her jaw comically. "I keep biting my tongue." She laughed, unconsciously rubbing her chin. She still hadn't fully gotten used to the small scar, a gift from that same fall, or the numbness. "Well, now all the guys are yours." Satisfied, Sveta blushed. "Ugh, Dad." Just kidding," he said, dismissing the very thought that his daughter would ever grow up and date guys. Sergei Sergeyevich blinked. Sveta was gone. The bone fragment was blurring and quiet. Exhausted tears rolled down her cheeks. She had fled again, just like then. What happened then? He tried to remember, but his thoughts wouldn't come together. He was going to talk to Sveta's boyfriend. And then they ran away. Ran away? There was a rustling sound. Sergei Sergeyevich raised his head. Nastya stood in front of him, dressed only in a silk nightgown. "Seryozha, are you feeling unwell?" She looked at him in surprise. Then she looked down at what he was holding in his hands. "What is this?" She let out a weak cry. He winced, as if from a loud squeal. He didn't like the sound. It pierced his skull like a corkscrew. Drilling, drilling, drilling. He jumped to his feet. Nastya, stunned, didn't even move. He hit her with a backhand, still clutching the bone in his hand. Nastya fell backwards. Sergei Sergeyevich swayed, feeling his head swim from the pressure change. Nastya awkwardly turned over and dashed toward the hallway, toward the exit. She tripped on the threshold and began to fall forward, but managed to maintain her balance. Sergei Sergeyevich finally came to his senses. He ran after her. Inside he was seething with anger. How could she pry into his grief? Where did such impudence come from? Nastya stood by the front door, her hands shaking as she tried to turn the key in the lock. Sergei Sergeyevich, passing a shelf on the wall, carefully placed his daughter's jaw on it and grabbed the telephone receiver from its base. Nastya turned around and he struck. The plastic case cracked. Her nose crunched. Nastya hit the back of her head on the wooden door and slid down, her vision blurred. Sergei Sergeyevich looked at Nastya and didn't recognize her. Her nose was crooked, her mouth was bloodshot, her hair was disheveled. She looked more like some kind of witch from a children's horror story. He raised his hand with the phone. "Seryozha, please, no, I can't, Nastenka." He hit her, then again and again. He laid the body in the bathtub. He went to the kitchen for a knife and made deep cuts along both of Nastya's arms. She trembled with the shivers of death, losing her inner warmth. He felt the hot fire inside this woman cooling, the frigid night creeping closer and closer, preparing to devour her. And there was nothing he could do. The cold was the beginning and end of everything, and warmth was only a respite. The blood left her body in spurts. Her tense muscles softened. Her reflexes weakened. How sad it all was, yet so natural. Nastya was gradually losing herself. Stepping out into the hallway, he picked up his daughter's jaw. Now he remembered everything. He'd been scared and uncomfortable remembering, but memory never asks when to present the information stored in the recesses of the brain. Just as teenagers never ask their parents what they can and can't do. Svetulya doesn't scream. Over the past few months, she seems to have developed the instincts of a small animal, constantly in danger. So, looking at the corpse of her boyfriend and her father with the bloody axe, she doesn't scream. Perhaps her sixth sense tells her that her father is angry. She turns and runs. Without thinking, he throws the axe at her back. She falls onto the soft pine needles. The axe falls next to her. He runs to her. He hears her wheezing and trying to get up. She can still hear her sobs, bringing back memories of the days when she was so little and naive. And every little thing hurt her tender heart. He hits her across the face with a heavy boot. There's squelching sound, moaning incoherently. She tries to crawl away. She covers her stomach with her hand. He raises the axe. He looks into his daughter's eyes that don't grow with her. They remain the same ones that looked at him with admiration when he tossed Svetulya into the air. "Daddy! Daddy! Stop it!" the little girl shouted jokingly. "Dad!" She opens her bloody mouth now. The blade slurps as it bites into her flesh, reaching the flesh of someone who shouldn't be there. Again and again, when the axe falls on Whistle's head, her eyes no longer see it. They are lost. He sits down next to her and runs his hand over her torn cheek. The scent of resin, dampness, and copper hits his nose. He strokes the slippery red skin. His fingers sink into the mass of pine needles, skin, muscle, and teeth like feet in a swamp. He gently runs his fingers over the scar on her chin and feels the bone shift. He feels the fracture where the toe of his heavy boot had lodged. A touching thought, unusual for him, flashes through his mind. It's always nice to have something as a memento, to remember a person on dull winter evenings. He gently turns Whistle's head and strikes with the axe. It doesn't work the first time, but he doesn't give up. In the end, the souvenir remains in his hands. He comes home tired and drained. His wife is at work. He looks around, trying to figure out where to put the souvenir, notices a bear, barely visible from behind the curtain, and a good idea occurs to him. 5 minutes later, with the souvenir safely hidden, he puts the knife away and goes to bed. He's having crazy, colorful dreams that fade away as soon as they're over. Sergei Sergeyevich wakes up and looks around in surprise. The morning sun is shining through the window. His wife is snoring next to him. He gets up and looks into his daughter's room. She's not there. He wakes his wife. She can't say anything coherent. Sergei Sergeyevich runs to the phone and starts calling everyone. The Panins, the Sergeyevs, the Greshkos. No one has seen Svetulka. He calls the police. Panic grips him. He remembers how an IT guy at work recently talked about search and rescue websites that organize people to look for lost children. He searches for the website and submits a request. After a while, an ad with her photo appears on the site. It hurts him to look at her face, trapped in a red frame. It hurts him to think that right now his daughter is somewhere else. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts. The convulsion stopped. Nastya went quiet. Blood dripped lazily, forming thick puddles. Her pale skin looked almost white against the crimson background. The blush of this beautiful woman flowed reluctantly down the drain. He turned on the shower, urging the leisurely red drops on. When he finished, he pulled a hammer from under the bathtub. Its handle was covered in crimson spots, its head was scratched, and its wedge was weakly held in the wood. In short, it was a working tool. He struck Nastya's jaw with the toe of the hammer, turned his head, and struck again, precisely and expertly. Now the bone dangled freely, held in place only by muscle and skin. He had a knife for that. No big deal. Half an hour later, he walked into the kitchen, stood on a stool, and pulled a metal can labeled buckwheat from the top shelf. He'd hated buckwheat porridge since childhood, so he could easily use it for other purposes. He pried the awkward lid with his fingernail and opened the box. He peered inside and chuckled with concern. Space was running low. He'd have to replace the container. He approached the table and overturned the jar. Jawbones rained down. Each one had 4 incisors and 2 canines. He'd been so careful, so not a single tooth had broken off. Here's a souvenir from Tanya Malova, 13, from a nearby neighborhood, not found. And here's one from Sveta Bolotova, his daughter's namesake, 15, from downtown, not found. Here's one from Milena Fadeva, Marina Ilyina, those poor lost ones. He sighed sadly. He sincerely hoped that these girls would be found someday. He remembered the song of the baby mammoth from the cartoon. It doesn't happen in this world that children are lost. Looking at the bones, he almost burst into tears. They would definitely be found, and his Svetulya would be found too, and Nastya would be found. Having collected the bones in a jar, he added Nastya's souvenir and put his jewelry box back. Then he returned to the bathroom. There was still work to do there. Sergei Sergeyevich woke up, refreshed and rested. He smiled at the sun outside the window. It seemed to him that today was simply made for good news. He jumped out of bed and stretched. A sharp pain shot through his arms. After briefly stretching his muscles, he went to the computer. He started it up, pacing impatiently as the ancient machine, waking up, reluctantly pumped electricity through his copper-tin veins and arteries. Finally, having waited, he opened his VK page. The news feed appeared on the screen. It featured a single ad from the search and rescue team's website. Anastasia Vitalievna Starova. Help find a person. Looking back at him from the photo was his Nastya, slightly younger and with long hair. "Oh my God," Sergei Sergeyevich muttered. She'd just stayed overnight with him 3 days ago. He'd even thought there might be something between them. Sergei Sergeyevich decided that Nastya might have gone somewhere without telling anyone. After all, she was a grown woman. Although he had never reposted ads from girls over 18, he made an exception here. He clicked on the arrow and in the pop-up window noted, "On my page." Then he went to his page and began scrolling down the list of ads. When he reached the end, he clicked on the ad with his daughter's photo. Nothing has changed. Sergei Sergeyevich sighed sadly, but then smiled. No matter, she'll definitely be found. The 15th of November, 2019. The 28th of November, 2019.